Hello, friends. Welcome to the No Destination podcast. I'm Dylan. It's been a couple months since we last spoke. Played some band shows, did some solo shows, started a new day job, which was a whole new routine, but was pretty exciting for me. Got COVID around Thanksgiving and with Christmas and everything else. It was just a good time to recharge the batteries after a pretty lengthy couple-year process of making Late Bloomer, putting it out, talking about Late Bloomer, promoting it, and all those things. So it was a great pause for me. And I'm sure that you got caught up on all the other stuff that you like to listen to and enjoy. January brings a lot of people to the table again as far as what I want to stop, what I want to start, what do I want to continue. I'm going to clear the table. I'm going to rewrite things. I'm not a big resolution person. More power if you are. I'm one of those people that gets a wild hair and then just runs about 100 miles an hour in one direction at the drop of a hat. So for folks like me, if you're like that, we do that when the mood strikes. I wish I was predictable as January. But January also reminds me of a record that I put out with Brilliant Mistakes. We just had the 4-year anniversary of the album Outsiders. Like relationships or friendships, your relationship with a work changes over time and what it means to you. But we put that record out on January 1st, 4 years ago, which, by the way, friends, if you're putting out music, don't put out a record on January 1st or really any holiday. If you hope to play the streaming game and get on playlist, that's just not a preferable path. But it meant a lot to us because we'd been working on that record for so long. And that was my first record that I'd made in a long time. Got to make it with some good friends. And it wasn't easy. I learned a whole lot of things. And it was talking with Chris recently, who is a drummer of Brilliant Mistakes. You know, listening back in hindsight, all the things that I nitpick, because like listening to a record, or if you write books, if you read your own book, or if you take photographs and you look at your own pictures, whatever it is, it's hard not to pick the thing apart, right? It's like standing in front of a mirror. If I stare long enough, I'm going to find something I don't like. I got balder. How is that possible? With records, it's no different. For the first couple years, for me, it was every time I heard it, I'd listen to a mixing decision or a musical decision and think, man, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have played this differently, or would have approached this in this other way. But as time gets more and more removed, those things become less and less, and it's just the feelings you had when making the record. And I had a lot of fun making Outsiders. And I tell the story a lot, but I think it bears repeating. It was really a record that we started on accident, Chris and I. And it started with just trying to make sure that the recording interface that we'd gotten worked. And I played a song that he had never heard before. And we did, I think, 2 or 3 takes. It might have been the second, I'm not sure. It was second or third, of a song called The Stories We Tell. And that's the version that made the record. We later tried to re-record it and see if we could get a better snare sound. We just couldn't replicate the feel of like The Stories We Tell, that very first solid take, which, like I said, was a second or the third one. And that's really what started the record. And that's what really kind of brought us down that path. And records start in different places. They keep going for different reasons, and they finish at different points, right? And so that's of interest to me because we just spent a whole lot of time talking about Late Bloomer and what that record meant, the work that went into it, what those songs were about, or giving some perspective on the recording process. But I don't think Late Bloomer ever gets made if not for Outsiders. That was the record where I really kind of came back to music after being away for a couple of years. So that record holds a special place in my heart. So, big shout out to Chris McAvoy and Michael Cotter and Bob Goen, who were also in Brilliant Mistakes. Andreas also played bass on a couple songs. And John Graboff played pedal steel on a couple of those tunes, who was in Ryan Adams and the Cardinals. But really proud of that record. Just had its 4-year anniversary, and I can now listen without picking it apart a bunch and just remember the times that I had making it. And that's just such a better place to be than like when you're involved specifically with the mixing process and trying to make as many of those decisions as possible. But happy birthday to that record. We're not going to spend too much time on that, but if you have a chance, check it out. I'll put a link down here in the description. But, what surprised me about the distance and taking a couple months to just catch my breath was the questions that I was asking myself about next year. So we talked about clearing the table. You could do a start, stop, continue model. You could talk about, hey, what do I want to accomplish next year? For me, it was just checked a bunch of things off the list in 2025. And that's where, I, in a lot of ways, Late Bloomer was like almost like a debut record of sorts. And so you can only have like one of those in a way. And so how will I try to not recreate it or be different, but what's the motivation now, right? I've already climbed up the mountain once. And so having the space was really important because for the first couple of weeks, I kind of needed to decompress, honestly. And not having a show to play, not having songs to think about was really important. But I started to ask myself questions about, hey, what would a good year look like creatively? Because that is something that I think got lost last year in trying to play shows, to put out the record and find new ways to talk about music or get music in front of new people who had never heard of me before. And so all this is kind of apropos to January. But for 2026, I really want to focus on connection. And I think there was a lot of gigs that I took. There was a lot of things that I posted that were not transactional, but just had like hey, I need to get the message out. I've got a new song. I've got a new album. I've got a new show. There's that, right? Like it's part of my job to talk about that stuff in a way. But if I were to say, hey, how can I connect more this year? It becomes less transactional and like, what would a good show be like? Because I played a lot of breweries. I didn't play as many listening rooms as I wanted to. So the shows that you're going to see that get posted this year are not going to be as often, maybe once a month, maybe once every 2 months. But I want them to be like more moments. So the first one of those is going to happen in February in a place called the Bird Room with our good friends Hydrofighter. Super excited to play that show with them. It's an intimate space of like 45, 50 people. We're going to record it. We're super excited about that show. And those are the kind of things that I want to do. I want to play shows that I get excited about. Not that play in breweries, but farmers markets. There you go. I played a couple of different of those just to be able to, like I said, get in front of people last year. And that's cool. And I'm just not going to take as many of those just because I want to have high value connection moments where I'm able to create a moment with things that I'm creating or passionate about. And so the first one of those is going to be February 7th. The other thing I'm dreaming up in the background is also like, I think it'd be really cool to do like an acoustic show with like a quartet. I mean, how awesome would that be? So like, I just want the moments to be special and unique and a reason to come out and see the band. And, if you've been out to see the band, we're so appreciative of that. Or if you've been out to see me, I'm so appreciative of that. And I think with that appreciation is thinking through like, well, how can we make these more moments and not just a thing to put on the calendar? And I think everybody wins in those. I'm not racing to put the record out in 2026. So the urgency is different. And I really want that urgency to be around connection. And I learned a lot and I want to take those lessons that I learned along the way and just have more intention in 2026. So it's not a pause. It's not like, hey, we're going away. It really boils down to not wanting to repeat either, shows just because we have good relationships with venues or wanting to write the same kind of songs. And so I'm challenging myself to work on different emotional textures. And I don't want to explain a bunch of those things. I want to see if I can build these things that I'm able to remove pieces of myself and they get stronger, but they're still personal. And that's not super easy. So I think on the last one of these, I talked pretty lengthy about the record was almost done. And I said that a lot when I recorded Late Bloomer. There was a lot of times when I was making Late Bloomer, I was like, hey, we're getting close. Like I've written all the songs for this record. And then I've told you guys in that last session, the last 4 or 5 songs we did really made the record what it became. And that process always changes. Things kind of come in chunks for me. And so I really thought from a creative standpoint, I had written all of the songs I was going to write for the follow-up record. And I had a narrative and a point of view that I was trying to get across. And then I wrote some more songs. And then I had a moment where I stood back and I was like, hey, I think the record is ready for me to really start, figuring out all the little sections. So the lyrics are there, the songs are there. It's just really about getting that last 10%. And then when I had time the past couple months, so when I took a pause and started asking, like, what did 2026 look like? It was all about being a lot easier on myself, which is, not always easy for me, no pun intended. But I didn't have any intention of writing any songs. And slowly but surely, I would pick up a guitar because I was inspired to, not because I felt I had to write something to finish anything. It was just, I've heard something in my head and I wanted to get that down. And so I've written a couple more songs and I'm really excited. And I'm not ready to say if they're done, but we're getting to a point where I believe in the next month or two, I'm going to book some studio time to begin that process, because there's a really strong foundation at this new core of songs that I'm really excited about. And so that's kind of how I'm being intentional from a creative standpoint, challenging myself, not wanting to repeat the same emotional textures or themes, and really grow. Because whether it's 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever it may be, who let Late Bloomer into their world, I want to build on that trust and not just try to write the same kind of songs, even if I felt those were some of my better songs. So that's how I'm kind of challenging myself. And so what I'm resisting now is going back to where I was or trying to be what Late Bloomer wasn't. So Tina Fey, who is a comedic writer, I think it was in her book, Bossy Pants, or it could have just been a quote, but I came across it a couple weeks ago. Essentially what she said is, like, after any big project that she does, she takes like 6 months off. She takes time off between projects intentionally, because the natural instinct of an artist is to do the opposite. And honestly, that's what it was for me too. Finished Late Bloomer and I thought about what the record was and I was like, it needs to be this now. And that's not always what the next thing should be, but that's just what you feel because you've been living in the world of that last creation so long. It feels natural to want to do something that's different, just as a, recoil to that inertia. And so, that really resonated with me because I'm really proud of Late Bloomer. And I'm not trying to tear the house down that we built. And I'm not trying to move away from that, but I am trying to do some certain things that challenge me. And that also comes in having these conversations with you guys. And so being really upfront and sharing stories was how we started this conversation with the first record. And I'm really going to challenge myself to have different types of conversations with you guys. Not because I don't think it's not cool, but I've already done that. I've already kind of given you a peek behind the curtain or stories that I would share at shows. And I'm going to challenge myself to talk about other things when it comes to the new songs. Because what I'm trying to protect is not only some of the things that are uniquely me in the songs, but I also want to allow for that space, which I think is where the magic happens, where people connect with art because of something that speaks to them. And I think a lot of times that's an unspoken thing that just happens naturally. And so you don't have to, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink is the expression, right? I want to make music that is challenging to me. And I've already kind of shared how I'm going to do that this next time around. But I also want to challenge myself on different types of ways to talk about the music, because I do want to put more space for there to be your own conclusions, your own assumptions, and what speaks to you about a thing, about a piece of work, about a song, about an album. And I think allowing for that space is important. But I think it's also great to be able to have that conversation on the first record, right? Playing a lot of solo acoustic shows, you kind of learn how to talk about your music differently, or the stories that get the laughs, or the stories that resonate with people because other people have been through similar situations. I do want to show some restraint. And that's more out of a place of confidence that I don't have to explain all the stories for the songs to mean something or the songs to hold up. So That's how I'm also going to challenge myself when it comes to these conversations. That's how I'm going to challenge myself to the shows I'm going to be playing this year. And, that's the one question I'll be asking myself specifically with the shows is, in 2026, will this help me connect, or is it just going to keep me busy? Just like these conversations. Frankly, there was times when I was doing this before, I probably could have recorded multiple times in a week because I just had a bunch of stuff to say. But it's also important that in those moments where maybe there's not as much to discuss, that those things will have space moving into the future. So that's where I'm at. That's the update that I wanted to share. The time away allowed me to be more intentional about what next year looks like, which I'm grateful for. So I'm curious, what would you like to hear in the coming year? Are there certain topics that would be of interest to you? Any kind of guest that you would be interested in me talking to? I'm curious. This is an open conversation. What was great about kicking this off in the fall last year was the responses I got from musicians and people that I'd never met before about, just, hey, really appreciate it. Glad I found it. It gave me a different perspective. Or musicians saying, hey, I've been through that too. That was reaffirming to hear that I'm not the only one. But I'm also curious, what are you going into 2026 with? What are your intentions? What have you thought about would be a successful 2026? If we were to fast forward a year from today, what do you want to accomplish? What would mean a lot for you as a creative person or as a listener or as just a friend? That'd be cool for me to hear. Anyway, friends, this has been the No Destination Podcast. We'll talk soon.